Okay, the next talk will be from Yifan Song, and he'll be talking about new techniques for building information-theoretic asynchronous MPC with linear communication.
Okay, so thanks for the introduction. I'm very happy to introduce our recent new progress for constructing information-theoretic MPC in the asynchronous setting. Actually, I'm going to show you that constructing IT MPC in the asynchronous setting is not that hard than the protocol in the synchronous setting. So just a little bit about the setting. So for the optimal resilience, we have N, which is 3T plus 1. T is the corruption threshold. And we want to achieve information-theoretic security with malicious security and guarantee of delivery. Okay, so in the synchronous setting, linear communication solution has already been known in 2012 by Ben Sensen, Phil, and Ostrowski. But in the asynchronous setting, such result is only known last year due to my two works. But actually, there's a big limitation, as you have already seen, that our previous work has a very large communication overhead, which is n to the power 14. So that means that even if you want to realize this, implement this protocol for a small number of parties, it's not going to be possible. But if you look at the synchronous setting, well, it's still not that efficient, but we can actually achieve order of C times n plus n to the power 6. So at least if you target for a small number of parties, then you can actually implement such a protocol. So before talking about our results, yeah.
What's happened with the statistical security? So this is like a fair probability of 2 to the minus n?
Yes. Okay, so before talking about our result, I want to first introduce the general approach and why we have this large overhead in the previous construction. So basically, the first step is to have a protocol that allows the dealer to distribute DQT Shamir sharings. And the key property we want to achieve is that we want to make sure every honest party should receive their shares eventually. And once you have such a protocol, basically, say when you want to reconstruct secret sharing, you can always use error correction because we only have 1/3 corruption. So you can always use error correction to reconstruct the secrets. So no party can stop honest parties from reconstructing the secret. And this also works in the asynchronous setting. Okay, now once you have this secret sharing protocol, we want to prepare random BO triple. And with BO triple, you can construct your online protocol just using BO triple, which only requires public reconstruction. So because due to the error correction property, the online protocol is actually quite efficient. So in our previous solution, we have this n to the power 12 overhead in the first step for secret sharing protocol. And we also have this n to the power 6 overhead for preparing random BO triple. But if you check the online phases, actually can achieve C times n plus n cubed after you prepare the BO triple. So the main overhead just comes from the first two steps, one for preparing random secret sharing, and one for generating the random BO triple. Okay, so in this talk, I'm going to show you that we can, for the first step, we can reduce the overhead to n to the power 5. And for the second step, we can even achieve n cubed, assuming some other functionality like ACS or random coin. To achieve our results, we give this new ACSS protocol, and we improve a key primitive called asynchronous packet information checking protocol. And we also give a better construction for computing the authentication text, which I will explain to you why we need that. And for triple generation protocol, we introduced a new technique which combines the party virtualization idea and triple extraction. But it's actually a very simple technique, as we will see later. So putting everything together, we can obtain IT AMPC with n to the power 6 overhead. This is just because you need to run this ACSS for each party, right? So you have n instances which amounts to n to the power of 6.
Question, if you allow, say, pseudo-random secret sharing, generation of shares, to what extent does it trivialize the question, or how much does this improve things?
So I think in the asynchronous setting, the point is that, like, the first step of this pseudo-random secret sharing is to establish this pairwise key, right? But if you want to do that in the asynchronous setting, it seems to be not that easy.
Sure, but if you do it once and then you use it every time you want to.
Yes, maybe the overhead just for establishing the key will be too large, right? I mean, I can imagine that you can say I can generate small number of ACSS and then reconstruct to every pair of parties to establish the key. But then anyway, you need to start with some kind of secret sharing. So.
But once you have, basically my question is, if you have a simple correlated randomness setup, then to what extent does it trivialize the question? If you have a trusted dealer that gives you correlated randomness before the protocol starts, then is it trivial, or is there still a question here?
Yeah, I mean, if you just give pure triples, then everything is simple, right? It depends on like what kind of correlation you want to have in the beginning. But if you say just for pairwise key, then I would say, I mean, for pseudo-random secret sharing, you need the number of parties to also be smaller, right? So it does not generally scale to the multiple parties. But it definitely resolves the first question of preparing this ACSS. But I also want to say that even with ACSS, preparing triple is also a difficult task. Not in this work, but in the previous works, right? This is also the reason that all the previous solution, even if you assume cryptographic assumptions, you still have this n square overhead. Okay, so a side note is that we actually have some idea to bring this even down to n to the power of 5, but we still need some more time to verify this idea. Okay. So I can imagine two open questions in this direction. So one is that can we further reduce the overhead depending on the number of parties? Because if you have n to the power of 5, even in that case, it's hard to handle like hundreds of parties, right? I think this question is even interesting if you say just focus on the security with the board. So in the literature, I feel like people in most of the case focus on GOD with asynchronous MPC, but in the synchronous setting, we do have very efficient protocol which only achieves security with the board.
So, the 10 to the 5, is that communication or computation?
Yes, it's a communication. Okay, and the second one is for concrete efficiency. I mean, in the synchronous setting, we have very simple protocol like DM protocol, which achieves a very small constant before C times n. But in the asynchronous setting, I mean, similar result, we don't really know. Even for semi-security with send omission or fail stop, we don't know like what kind of protocol will have, like say, the best constant. Okay. So maybe let me talk about first about triple generation. So usually, let's assume that we can prepare random sharing for now. Now, usually what we do is to prepare this random sharing for A and B, and then you multiply them together. And in the synchronous setting, you can use DM protocol where you prepare this double sharing. And to achieve malicious security, let's say we can use party elimination or dispute control. So when the computation fails, you just figure out which two parties have conflict, and then you mark them, and you can continue. But in the asynchronous setting, it turns out that both tasks are quite difficult so for double sharing, it turns out that just preparing degree T Shamir sharing is already very difficult. So not mentioning how to distribute this degree 2T sharing. And for the second part is that in the asynchronous setting, you cannot hope all the parties cooperate you on time. So maybe it's hard at the later moment when you find out that the computation fails, it's hard to figure out which two parties are actually have conflict. Okay, so in the previous construction, Chaudhary and Patry introduced a very interesting technique which allows you to prepare triples without increasing the degree, so that you do not need to prepare this double sharing. And the basic idea is to let all parties together prepare 3 polynomials which are shared by all the parties. And this polynomial satisfies that h is equal to f times g. So for every point, this F beta, G beta, H beta will be a Biot triple. Okay, so of course we cannot hope all the parties participate. Let's say that the first two L plus 1 parties participate. And you can think that L is just T for now. Okay, now what we do is that we'll let each party distribute a random Biot triple, and we'll use the first L plus 1 triples as the evaluation results for these 3 polynomials. And we just define F and G to be of degree L, so you can interpolate F and G using these L plus 1 points. But if you want to interpolate H, which will have degree 2 times L, so you need additional points. And this is done by using the rest of the Biot triples, and you just do the multiplication, the Biot triple technique to compute the multiplication. Okay, now you will find out that because we just use the Biot triple directly from that party, so in the case we have T quadriparties, we will either use a triple from those quadriparties in the first L rows, or we will use the triple to compute multiplication. So the adversary is able to learn at most T rows. But how many randomness do we have? So remember that F and G has degree L, so there are L plus 1 random values. So eventually, the number of triple you can extract out will be L plus 1 minus T. Okay, now if you plug in the number, we need basically n-squared communication to build a polynomial, but each time you can only extract 1 triple, and therefore you need n-squared communication. And this is basically the best we know before our crypto work last year. And as Chinda just mentioned, what we do in our last year is just to extend this idea in 2 different ways so that they have conflict success requirements, and we just combine them together and design a mechanism to require each party to either participate both process or none of them, or neither of them. Okay, so in this way, we can ensure at least one process will succeed. Well, this idea is interesting, but first it requires a very careful product design, especially the second process where you need to make sure the secrecy is still maintained, even if there are more than quadriparties than the requirements has participated. And the second one is that it has some large overhead, which is n12.6. Okay, so now our new ideas actually is very simple. So we first assume there are actual additional parties that can help us prepare triples. So let's say we have capital N parties, and among those parties, the correspondence threshold is just 1/9, which is much smaller than 1/3. Okay, now what you can do is to ask every new parties, V1 to V capital N, to generate random Biot triples and share them to all the parties P1 to Pn. Let's say using ACSS. And now you can just use the CP17 triple extraction, because first you can expect to receive capital N minus capital T triples, because this is the number of honest additional parties, right? And now after you receive those many triples, only a small fraction of triples may come from quadriparties. So if you just plug in the number into the CP17 triple extraction, you can extract out linear amount of triples. So this allows us to achieve linear communication. Now, how should we instantiate those additional parties? We just use the party virtualization. So we simply let every pair of parties to emulate a virtual party by running a secure 2-party computation protocol. So now you can see capital N is just n squared, because we have n squared pairs. And on the other hand, for every pair of parties Pi and Pj, at least one party is honest. Then due to the secrecy of the 2-party computation protocol, the view of this virtual party will be hidden to the adversary. So that means that what the adversary can see are only the parties where those 2 parties, Pi and Pj, are both corrupted. So we can see the corruption threshold will be this small t square, which is just capital N/9. Okay? Yeah.
Isn't it better to choose, instead of using n squared, all pairs, just choose a random set of pairs or something like this? Like the adversary is non-adaptive.
Yes, so we can do that, but maybe not in the asynchronous setting. I will explain this later. Okay, so actually this idea have 2 problems. So first, we want to realize array Vij by using a two-party computation protocol. But remember, we want array Vij to share a Biot triple, which involves multiplication. But we know that there's no information-theoretic MPC that allows two-party to prepare triple. Okay? And the second issue is that, well, if Pi is corrupted, even if Pj is honest, of course, the view is hidden to the adversary. But Pi may choose to not respond due to the asynchrony. So in that case, we may not hear back from that party. So maybe this also answers your question that if you choose randomly, then probably you cannot really hear back from those parties. Okay. So how should we resolve these two issues? For the first one, we just apply CP17 again. And this time, we ask P1 to Pn to prepare triples for this array parallel party Pi and Pj. What we do is just array party P1 to Pn generates random Biot triple over additive share rings and share them to Pi and Pj. So Pi and Pj will just run triple extraction to obtain a random Biot triple between these two parties. So you may wonder why this does not bring this n-squared communication back. Indeed, on one hand, we can only extract one triple in this process. But you notice that this CP17 extraction process is only run between Pi and Pj rather than among all the parties. Okay? So this naturally gives you a factor of n saving. So we can achieve linear communication at this step. Okay. Now, after Pi and Pj prepare random Biot triples, they will share them to all the parties by using ACSS. And this comes to the second issue. So the good news is that we can still hear back from virtual parties which are fully emulated by two honest parties. And how many such virtual parties? It will be n minus t squared, which is roughly 4 capital N by 9. And now if you plug in this number in the CP17 extraction process, we can still extract linear amount of triples. Okay? So basically, what we can do is just run this prepare triple is just to run these two steps. First, we ask all the parties by using CP17 to prepare random Biot triple over additive sharing for each parallel parties. And we can achieve linear communication because this process is only run between each parallel parties, which are just two parties. And then every parallel parties will extract random Biot triple, which is then shared back to all the parties by using ACSS. And now we apply CP17 again, and this time we can extract a constant fraction of the Biot triples. Okay, so any question about this part? Okay, so for the second part, I want to talk a little bit of this complete secret sharing protocol. So maybe let me first motivate this question, say why this is difficult. So remember that we want to ensure that eventually all the honest parties should receive their shares. But you can imagine a corrupt dealer may choose to send incorrect share or even send nothing to some honest party. And due to the asynchrony, it is possible that some honest party has already accepted his share, say at some time tau, but the other honest party may have a very bad network, so we cannot expect any response from that party before time tau. Okay, so this means that in the worst case, when the party P1 accepts his shares, we can only expect T+1 honest parties obtain their shares. So the rest of the honest parties may not receive anything at this moment, and we need these T+1 honest parties to help those honest parties to recover their shares. And what makes it even worse is that the correct parties may send incorrect shares, so this may cause those rest of the honest parties end up with incorrect results. So in the previous work, we resolved this issue by first establish authentication. At a very high level, it allows a verifier PV to check the shares received from some party PI. So to achieve that, PV will sample a long-term key called mu and a short-term key called nu. And if we want to authenticate the share for the party PI, we are going to compute an authentication tag tau, which is the inner product between share I and the long-term key mu plus the short-term key nu. So this share I and mu are both vectors. Then later, PI may send the shares together with the tag, and the PV can check the correctness of share by comparing the tag. Okay. Now, what we want to do in the first step is to ask every party PI to authenticate his shares under every party PV's keys. Of course, in this process, we need all the parties to participate to help PI to compute the tax. And eventually, we say the sharing phase succeed if we can find out 2T+1 parties who claim they have authenticated their shares. Okay, now among these 2T+1 parties, there are T+1 honest parties, right? And because of the authentication tags, we can distinguish from cracked shares and wrong shares for these 2T+1 parties. So we can only use cracked shares, and this allows us to reconstruct the secret. So in other words, you can think that at this moment, we have achieved the so-called verifiable secret sharing in the sense that we can always reconstruct the secret without the help from the dealer. But remember, at this moment, it is possible that only parties in M can obtain their shares, but the rest of parties may not have their shares. So the second step will be reconstructing the shares to those T parties. And this step would require to use Barry polynomial. I'm not going to introduce that, but the key property we require is that whenever a party sends you a share, you should be able to verify whether this is a correct share or a wrong share. So just recall that only parties in M may obtain authentications. So if PI is in the set M, then this is simple. PI just sends the shares together with the text, and PV can verify the shares. But if PI is not in this set, which means that PI may not obtain the authentication text, then what we can do is that the party PV will ask all the parties to help him reconstruct a random linear combination of all the sharings. And the reason we can do this is just because these authentication tags are linearly homomorphic. So PV will basically challenge these shares by asking all the parties to reconstruct a random linear combination, and then check whether the received share matches this linear combination. Okay, so this is the previous approach. But at this moment, a question is that what we require is to let parties in M to obtain authentication tags under each party PV's keys. But remember, in the asynchronous network, we cannot hope response from every party. Okay, so how should we do that? In the previous solution, what we do is to let all parties prepare random secret sharing and use the secrets as the keys for each party PV. So in this way, even if PV is not online, all the parties can still help party PI to compute the tag. So the good news is that the size of the key will be sublinear in the number of sharings we want to distribute. Therefore, we can use a relatively expensive ACSS protocol to generate those keys. But this is also the issue, the main overhead we have in the ACSS protocol. So what we do in this work is that we will not require each party PI to obtain authentication under each party's keys, but only under 2T+1 party's keys. And we notice that it's still sufficient to allow each party to verify PI's shares. So of course, if the verifier is in the first 2T+1 parties, the verification can be done by just receiving the share and the tag. And if the verifier is in the last T parties where PI does not have the authentication tag, so what we can do is that PI will just send the share I together with all the tags to the verifier. And the verifier will ask help from this 2T+1 parties. If he receives T+1 parties say, OK, I accept the shares, then the verifier will accept the shares. So the key point here is that among these T+1 parties, at least one party is honest, so this honest party will help PV verify PI's shares. OK, so why we want to do this? Because in this way, we can expect that the verifier PV is also online, because we do not require authentication tags from every party PV's keys. So we can expect that PV is online, so there's no need to generate ACSS, but we can just let PV to distribute the shares by himself. Okay, now the benefit is that we can expect both the dealer and PV are both online, so we can just use a mildly modified synchronous protocol to compute the authentication tag. So maybe let me briefly explain how this is done. Just assume that all the parties are honest for now. So we will first let dealer shares PI's shares share I using some degree T Shamir. and the party PV will share his long-term key mu by using another dequotation mu. Okay, now you can notice that because the dealer will anyway dispute shares of the actual secret sharing he wants to share, this S, and if you think that the secret position is not at 0 but at position I, then you can view it as the dequotation mirror of the S party shares. This is actually from the synchronous protocol in BFO12. Okay, now we want to compute the inner product between share I and mu, so PV will just share the long-term key using the same secret position at position I. Okay, but a small issue here is that now in this case, we cannot send shares to party PI because this place we store the secret, which is the long-term key. We don't want to reveal the key to PI. And to compensate this missing share, we follow the previous work by setting the value at evaluation point 0 to be 0. So this means that if PI is an honest party, then what quiet parties can learn include T quiet party shares together with this value 0 at point 0. So actually, the quiet parties can learn the authentication key if PI is honest. But this is fine because when PI is honest, anyway, we are going to authenticate an honest party's shares. So an honest party will never lie about his shares. But if PI is corrupted, then because of this missing share, so the quiet party still only learn T points, which hide the, so we can still hide the keys to the adversary. Okay, now after the secret sharing, every party will compute the inner product of its shares and then additively share the result to the dealer and the PV. And again, we can hope response from 2D plus 1 parties. And using these 2D plus 1 parties, the dealer and the PV can locally compute an additive secret sharing of share I and mu. So this is just you can think this is just the same process as the BJW construction, right? So each party multiplies their shares and then reshare his result. Okay, now the dealer will take his additive share as the tag, and party PV will take his additive share as the short-term key. So you can verify this satisfies authentication tag we need. Then later on, the dealer will just pass the tag to the party PI. Okay, so it's just almost the same as the synchronous protocol. So in the malicious case, we have several issues. The first one is that if the dealer and the PV are both honest, the fear is that some quiet party PJ may share some incorrect results. And we can do this, we can check this. Basically, we'll compute 2 copies of the tags, and the verifier will send a random combination of the key to the dealer, and the dealer will check whether PJ generates the correct additive shares. And the second case is that if the dealer is honest, but PV is corrupted, then the fear is that PV may not use valid equity polynomials for the authentication keys. And this is done by using a post-check. We are going to compute another copy of the authentication tags. And after agreeing on these 2D plus 1 parties who provide correct additive shares, the dealer will challenge PV to give him a random combination of the authentication keys. So the point here is that if PV uses a different share for PJ, sign that uses to send to the dealer, then with very high probability, the dealer will detect the inconsistency if PJ's shares are random. So this only works for random ACSS, but we can naturally turn to the standard ACSS by asking the dealer broadcast the difference between the actual value and the random secret value at a later point. And finally, if the dealer is corrupted but PV is honest, then the dealer may send incorrect tags to the party PI. So we can also detect such behaviors by further compute a fourth copy, and the party PV will just send a random combination of the key to the party PI, and the PI will check the tags. So basically, compare with the semi-honest case, we just need to compute 3 copies of additional tags, so the cost just increases by a constant factor. Okay, and one missing issue here is that if the dealer is corrupted, then what if the dealer disputes invalid dignity polynomials? So this can be checked by using the previous work where we use this asynchronous packet information checking protocol. I'm not going to talk about it, but basically it allows the dealer to commit the dignity Shamir and then prove to every party that his share is correct. Okay, so in summary, compared with Simon's protocol, we will compute 4 copies of the text and use each copy in these 3 phases to detect malicious behaviors. So it's only a constant factor of blowup in the communication. And a final notice about the communication overhead. So let's say the dealer wants to share capital N ACSS. So what we do is that we'll divide them to be K groups, and each group contains M sharings. And the authentication key will be of size M. So we will have 2 main overheads. One is to distributing the key. Remember that we need to distribute the key for every pair of parties PV and PI, which amounts to Mn times n cube field elements. And also we want to compute the tags for each group. And for each group, for each PV and PI, we require all parties' efforts to compute the tag. So there will be another overhead, which is k times n cube. So in total, we will have this mn cube plus kn cube, subject to m times k to be capital N. Now we want to keep the main term to be linear, so we will finally have the overhead to be n12 Okay, so that is. I'm happy to take any question.
Okay, well, let's put the speaker again. This concludes the program for day 4. See you all back here for day 5.